He has spent decades mastering philosophy, law, medicine, and theology. He has pursued every theoretical discipline available. Yet, standing in his study at midnight, the aging scholar looks at his shelves and admits he is no wiser now than when he began. This is the wall at the end of intellectual accumulation. You can hold a PhD, finish a dissertation, and become the leading expert, only to discover that information about the world does not provide a reason to want to live in it. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe lived the very life he was writing about. This is the study where he worked on Faust for 60 years. Goethe was a polymath who reached the peak of German social and intellectual success. Despite these achievements, he was notoriously restless. He reportedly said he could count his truly happy days on a single hand. His life was not a steady state of satisfaction, but an exhausting, continuous pursuit. Faust's crisis serves as a reflection of this internal exhaustion, the moment where a lifetime of learning reveals itself to be a museum of facts with no spiritual center. Before the story unfolds on earth, Goethe shifts to a prologue in heaven. He reveals that Faust's personal depression is actually the subject of a cosmic wager between God and a demon named Mephistopheles. In this play, God's perspective on human behavior is unconventional. He does not demand perfection. He accepts that as long as a person strives, they will inevitably make mistakes. God bets on Faust's soul because he views the scholar's restless dissatisfaction as an inherent good. The wager is not a test of Faust's moral purity, but rather of his capacity to keep moving. Within this framework, damnation is redefined. It isn't a consequence of doing wrong, it is the consequence of doing nothing. The only fatal error is the decision to stop seeking. When Mephistopheles enters the study to collect Faust's soul, he finds a man so desperate for meaning that he is willing to sign a supernatural contract. But the terms Faust demands are uniquely dangerous. Faust bets the demon that no earthly pleasure, no matter how intense, can ever make him feel truly satisfied. He is wagering his soul on the impossibility of his own contentment. This analysis of the contract highlights the stay clause. Faust agrees to die and serve the devil only if he ever finds a single moment so beautiful that he wants to remain in it forever, ceasing to strive further. This signature changes the nature of Faust's existence. He is safe from the devil only as long as he remains dissatisfied. To be happy in this contract is to be damned. The Faustian bargain is a gamble on human nature, a bet that the human soul is built to move, and that arriving at a final destination would mean the end of the self. To test Faust, Goethe presents a demon who is witty and intellectually sharp. Mephistopheles does not use brute force. He uses a seductive, coherent philosophy. He identifies himself as the spirit that eternally denies. He represents a pure nihilism, the belief that because all things eventually perish, the act of creating them was a mistake, and existence itself is vanity. This spirit of negation is a psychological force. It is the voice that dismisses effort, suggesting that since nothing lasts, nothing matters. Mephistopheles' strategy is to drag Faust into what he calls shallow insignificance. He tries to distract Faust's intellectual fire with easy, mindless hedonism, hoping the scholar will finally get bored enough to stop trying. The devil's most effective weapon is not horror, but the intellectual elegance of meaninglessness, the idea that striving is a fool's errand. Faust eventually rejects his life of sterile contemplation. He signals this shift by retranslating the opening of the Gospel of John, changing "in the beginning was the Word" to "in the beginning was the deed." He leaves the safety of his books for the visceral reality of action, trading the certainty of theory for the messy consequences of lived experience. This study of the play's first stage outlines the failure of pure intellectualism, describing how knowledge becomes a double-edged sword when divorced from practice. Further down, it details the sinking of sensory enjoyment, showing how fleeting pleasure and momentary experience only deepen his spiritual emptiness. Choosing to embrace the deed means accepting error. He realizes the only way to move past a life of moth-eaten scholarship is to directly engage with the world, even if that engagement leads to sin. In Goethe's framework, goodness is not the avoidance of sin, but the persistent courage to keep striving despite it. Error is viewed as a necessary byproduct of human development. Stasis, therefore, is the ultimate spiritual death. The restless dissatisfaction that Faust feels is not a failure of character, but a sign of a soul that is still alive and seeking. Faust is ultimately saved. He is redeemed not because he achieved a state of perfection, but because he never allowed himself to be lulled into self-sufficiency or sloth. Goethe followed this principle until his final breath in 1832. Having completed his life's work, his last reported request was not for peace or rest, but for more light. Faust teaches that our feelings of inadequacy and our constant restlessness are not defects. They are the engines of our growth and the only things that truly keep us from the devil. In this claustrophobic study, surrounded by the physical weight of books and instruments, an aging scholar hits the absolute limit of human intellect. Out of total despair, he signs a contract in his own blood with a demon who embodies pure, destructive nihilism. Mephistopheles does not try to tempt Faust with piles of gold or immediate political leverage. His strategy is much sharper. He offers unbridled, visceral experience. The trap hidden inside this contract is absolute. Faust will lose his soul to hell the exact second he feels true contentment. The moment he stops striving and asks a single fleeting experience to last forever. To survive this impossible game, Faust has to abandon the safety of his isolated academic theories. He must step outside and begin actively consuming the physical world. The first casualty of this consumption is Gretchen. She is a devout, innocent young woman living entirely within the narrow, modest constraints of her local community. Faust becomes obsessed with her, but he does not love her. He treats her exactly the way the philosopher Immanuel Kant warned against, as a mere instrument, a means to an end, used simply to cure his own existential boredom. The collateral damage of this unthinking ambition is rapid. Faust provides Gretchen with a sleeping potion to use on her mother so they can be alone. The potion proves fatal. When her brother, Valentin, discovers the affair, he challenges Faust in the street. Mephistopheles guides Faust's blade, and Valentin is murdered. Left pregnant, publicly shamed, and severely isolated from her society, Gretchen loses her mind. In a state of total madness, she drowns her newborn child. Condemned to execution, Faust breaks in to rescue her. She refuses. Surrendering to divine judgment, she demonstrates an unflinching moral clarity Faust completely lacks. The bright, innocent melody that accompanied her early days shifts permanently into a minor key. Goethe frames relentless human striving as an engine of salvation. Yet here, on the intimate human scale, that exact same striving completely eradicates an innocent life. The scale of the narrative violently expands. Faust leaves the Gothic darkness behind and steps into the blinding daylight of the Holy Roman Empire's court. Here, Mephistopheles executes a massive societal trick. He convinces the emperor to solve his paralyzing debts by printing paper money, supposedly backed by gold that is still buried deep underground. This grants the empire a dangerous, intoxicating new ability, creating perceived value ex nihilo, out of thin air. It is the birth of modern financial abstraction. From economics, Faust turns to history. He descends into the underworld to conjure and seduce Helen of Troy, attempting to physically possess classical antiquity itself. Human emotion is no longer enough to satisfy his hunger. His ambition now demands the active consumption of entire economies and ancient mythologies. Faust undertakes what he considers his ultimate work. He launches a massive coastal land reclamation project, physically conquering nature to forge new territory. But this progress carries a severe cost. An innocent old couple, living directly on the targeted land, refuses to move. Faust delegates the problem to Mephistopheles, who simply burns the couple alive in their home. The violent extermination of an obstacle is neatly redefined as necessary progress. Nearing death, blind and frail, Faust stands at the edge of his massive excavation. He listens to the digging and imagines the free, prosperous society that will eventually thrive on the land he created. Believing he has finally achieved true meaning, he utters the fatal words of the contract: "Stay, you are so beautiful." But Goethe springs a philosophical trap. Faust isn't praising his present reality, he is praising an imagined future. Because he remains dissatisfied, he is still striving. And because he is still striving, the devil loses the wager. The final moments of the play present a profound philosophical discomfort. Faust, the man directly responsible for the complete destruction of Gretchen, is saved from hell by her specific intercession from heaven. Goethe concludes his masterpiece with the concept of the eternal feminine. He is not referring to a biological trait, but to a supreme, universal principle of grace, relationship, and unearned mercy. This principle stands in strict opposition to how Faust lived his entire life. He believed he could conquer reality, force outcomes, and acquire meaning through sheer will and ceaseless action. Yet he is ultimately saved by the one thing he could not engineer or take by force. He is saved by forgiveness, freely given. Goethe leaves us with a complex completion to his worldview. Relentless human striving is absolutely necessary to drive progress, but alone, it is entirely insufficient without grace. The architecture of this ambition did not die in the 19th century. We see the exact same bargain operating inside modern technology campuses. This academic analysis reveals how modern society, driven by strict technological rationality, mirrors Faust's obsession with infinite growth. By prioritizing unconstrained algorithmic expansion, we repeat his core sin, reducing human beings to mere data points, treated solely as a means to an end. We return to the claustrophobia of a dark room, a single candle, and a dying man. Goethe's final historical words on his deathbed were simply, "more light." The tragedy of Faust is our own blueprint. Our relentless pursuit of the infinite must be firmly anchored by our shared humanity, lest we lose our souls to the very progress we build.